Slumber Party Massacre.
Party Massacre 2. If you go, don't go all the way.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about Scream Factory's newest release, the Slumber Party Massacre 1 and 2 on 4K Blu-ray. But before we do that, if you guys are into 4K reviews, movie reviews, some tech, some video game stuff, and some podcasts along the way, then please consider subscribing because we do all that here. So, the Slumber Party Massacre is I don't know if I would say iconic 80s horror movie. It's definitely pretty well known, and I think that's why we got a 4K release. So 1982 was the first Slumber Party Massacre, so it's pretty early on in the 80s. The slasher genre has already started at this point, but I think this is like the beginning of where we started getting a flood of slasher movies, you know, because Halloween Black Christmas really started the whole slasher thing, and then we had Halloween and Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street was actually after this. That was 1984. And actually in part 2, the police officer's name is Kruger, so that's definitely a callback, because part 2 is 1987, where part 1 is 82, so part 1 is actually a little bit older than 1984's original Nightmare on Elm Street. So these movies are very different, part 1 and part 2. Now, Scream Factory also has a previous double feature Blu-ray release of the Slumber Party Massacre 2 and 3, which is rare, out of print, and pretty sought after. And I don't know if this is going to necessarily bring the value of that one down, because now that you can get part 2 on 4K, you really only need part 3, and that's the one that's missing. So maybe it'll bring it down a little bit, because people might not be looking for it as much if they only wanted part 2, which I don't really know why you would want part 2, because part 2 is, spoilers, not a great movie. It is very cheesy, extremely over the top. So part 1 is somewhat pretty grounded for the most part. It's kind of a generic slasher movie, where part 2 they went to space with this one. It was very weird. It was like basically a VH1 or MTV music video. I can't say that I really enjoyed part 2, where part 1 was pretty good. Part 2 I just didn't really love. You know, it checks a lot of the boxes of stuff that I would like. You know, it's corny, it's not the best acted. I think it's only like 76 minutes. It's very short. It's less than a 90-minute movie, so I appreciate that. If it was any longer than it was, then I would have been a little upset with it. But overall, I definitely prefer the first one over part 2. Have you guys seen part 2 and part 3? I haven't seen 3 yet. I've only seen the first 2. And after seeing 2, I'm not really in a rush to check out the third one, although I don't really know anything about it. So if it's better than part 2, let me know, and then I will try to check it out. So if you're a fan of the slasher movies, I think you would enjoy at least part 1 if you're really a big fan of slashers and you like that 80s just corny slasher movies that, you know, all us horror fans really like, then you would probably like part 2. I just didn't love it. Again, I didn't hate my time with it. I found myself laughing more than anything, because it was pretty ridiculous at times, or most of the movie actually was just really pretty ridiculous. And I felt like the killer was like really trying to pull off like a John Travolta from Grease look. I guess that's what he was going for. I'm not sure. But yeah, again, it's just very strange. It was like just a really, really weird music video, and the killer just kind of came out of nowhere. He came out of her dream almost. So I'm not sure where their intentions were with part 2. I'm not sure where they were trying to go, but they went some places. Wide open spaces. Check it out. You might like it, you might not, but it's definitely worth the watch, and you're in and out of there. I think it's only like an hour and 15 minutes, so it's not terrible. So overall, part 1, part 2, again, I like part 1, but they're still decent movies, worth a watch, and part 1 I think is a little bit more iconic and a little bit more grounded, and it's more I got more enjoyment out of the first one, although I got some more laughs out of part 2. The killers in both of these are really just because I thought after watching the first one, I was like, oh, that killer was pretty boring. There was no motive. Like, you know nothing about the killers in either of these. And at least part one just kind of makes sense. He's just a random guy, and he's just going after these girls. And I was able to be okay with that, but part two, I'm just scratching my head the whole time. I'm like, what is going on? If you guys know anything about it, let me know down in the comments, because I'm at a loss here. I'm not entirely sure what I just watched, but I'm gonna tell you how it looked. So, Scream Factory gave us part 1 and part 2. Like I said previously in the video, there was already a part 2 and part 3 double pack Blu-ray, but now we have the Slumber Party Massacre and Slumber Party Massacre part 2 on 4K in a double pack. And the Slumber Party Massacre also had a standalone Blu-ray. So Scream Factory has touched all 3 of these on Blu-ray, and they only put 1 and 2 onto 4K. I don't know if we're going to get part 3 later down the line to complete the collection. I'm not entirely sure, but I know part 3 is only available in the double pack with part 2. So lately, Scream Factory has not really impressed me too much, and Scream Factory is really one of my favorites because horror is pretty much my favorite genre, and generally Scream Factory is the one to give us all of the horror movies, at least a boutique studio level. As you notice, there's no slipcover here, which is a bummer because I enjoy the slipcovers on my releases. But, you know, it's not the end of the world, I guess. So we get the traditional cover art side by side, and you have all your information on the back. However, what they did give us here is a reversible cover art. So these are not the traditional theatrical posters. It is pretty cool, but you lose a lot of, well, all the information. I kind of like the one it comes with, so I'm going to not reverse mine. I'm going to leave mine with just the traditional cover art on there and all my stats on the back and my synopsis. I'm going to leave it like that. But again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I wish they would start making these black cases like a smoked clear, you know, like a dark gray, but you could see through them, kind of like the Xbox 360 Platinum Hits cases, where they were dark, but you could see through it, so we could enjoy when they do double arts like this, or reversible art. So this is a 3-disc set, so the 4Ks are both on 1 disc, where we have the original Slumber Party Massacre Blu-ray standalone by itself, and part 2 on Blu-ray by itself. Now, all the special features for each movie are on their own Blu-ray discs. So, part 1, all their special features are on that one. Part 2 is that. And then the 4K disc has both movies, and there's no special features on the 4K disc itself. Now, again, they were able to fit both movies on a 4K disc because these movies are only like 76 minutes, 77 minutes, I think, is part 1 and part 2. So they're short movies. They're like an hour 15, hour 20 at most, and that's like with the credits. So they're very short, they're quick watches, and that's why they were able to fit both on one 4K disc. A 4K disc will hold more information and more data and, you know, gigabytes per disc than a standard Blu-ray. And that is one difference between a regular Blu-ray disc and a 4K disc, is the amount of storage and data it can hold. So I appreciate the different disc arts here. I had the original Blu-ray, which I never even opened it. I ended up giving it to John, but I imagine this is what the disc looked like. So we have different cover arts. It looks like it's the theatrical covers on the discs, where we got different disc art on the 4K disc, but still for each movie, which is pretty cool. So visually, comparing it to the Blu-ray discs that are in this box, which are the previous Blu-ray discs released prior to this, it is quite an upgrade because you do get Dolby Vision. So we have Dolby Vision HDR, and as you guys know, Dolby Vision is my favorite HDR over HDR10, HDR10 Plus. I think Dolby Vision is the clear winner most of the time. And I think it did pretty well here. It definitely lended itself pretty well to these movies. The Blu-rays looked pretty good in most scenes, where the 4K looks great in all scenes. So there's some darker scenes in part 2 where I noticed cleaned it up a lot, because the HDR is going to make dark scenes look great, and even light scenes, it's going to make the colors pop more. So on the Blu-rays, the light scenes were fine, and there wasn't a huge difference, but where I think the 4K really helped these movies was the darker scenes. And of course, the brighter scenes, it did make the colors a little more vivid and pop a bit more. And again, it's an 80s movie, so they got these flashy color clothes on, and so there's a lot of colors. I'm thinking part 2, just that one's just more fresh in my head right now because that's the last one I watched. There's a lot of grass in there, and they're at some vacationing home, so you see the green in the trees between the contrast in the sky, and then the white cement patios around the pool and stuff. So the 4K, I think, definitely is an upgrade over the Blu-ray. It's not the biggest upgrade, but it is definitely a noticeable upgrade. And again, that's really the HDR putting in all that work to make it look fantastic. So overall, I think visually it is an upgrade. Both movies do look much better in 4K than the previous Blu-ray. If you have the previous Scream Factory Blu-ray, I'm not entirely sure if you need to run out and upgrade this. I mean, it is an upgrade. If you're a super fan of the movie, then sure, definitely grab it because it is definitely a noticeable upgrade. But again, it's just really the darker scenes and just a little bit more color out of the colors throughout. Again, the skin tones look a little bit better. The colors of the bathing suits, the clothes, the grass, the scenery, everything looks just a tad bit better because that HDR just really, I'm not entirely sure what buttons are pressed when they apply HDR over it, but HDR just really makes everything really snap and look fantastic. So as far as audio goes, it's the same exact audio track. It's a 2.0 mono that was on the previous Blu-rays. So we have no audio upgrade over onto the 4K disc, which is kind of a bummer, but they don't sound bad at all. The audio track sounded fine. Again, I think if they would have done an audio track, it would have been a no-brainer to upgrade to this. But if you're upgrading on just a visual level, then you might have something more to think about because, again, the Blu-rays don't look terrible. I think the 4Ks are just a bit better. I'm going to say maybe 10 to 15% better over the previous Blu-ray would be the visual upgrade here, which is a pretty good amount. And if you're a fan of the movies, then yes, sure, go grab this because it is a nice set and it is cool to have them both in a double pack. And I know part 2 is, I guess, pretty sought after, or it's part 3, because again, part 2, part 3 are in that double pack. I'm not sure which one people really wanted out of that, but it is going for a few dollars on eBay and it is out of print. So this is the best way to grab both of these movies because they definitely have never looked as good as they have here. And you also get the previous Blu-rays in here as well. So for a 3-disc set, and I don't think those previous Blu-rays on here are updated because these are new 4K scans from 2022, and I think these discs are older than that. So it is a new scan, and it definitely is an upgrade over the previous Blu-ray. So overall, movie itself, that's for you to decide if you like the movie. I think they're okay. I'm a giant horror fan. I really love the horror genre. I think part 1 was pretty good. Part 2, not so much. Visuals, I think, are pretty noticeable upgrade over the previous Blu-rays. They're pretty good to great. They're not perfect. And as far as audio goes, same as the previous Blu-rays, and they are good enough. I would have liked a new audio track because that definitely would have warranted the price of this. But again, 3-disc set, reversible cover art. I guess it's not really out of print anymore, but part 2 was out of print for a while, and now this is pretty much the only way to grab it is in this double pack. So I can definitely recommend grabbing this if you're a fan of the movies. If you haven't checked them out, maybe wait for a sale because part 1 is okay to good and part 2 is like borderline, I don't want to say it, but it's borderline a bad movie. Not terrible. I enjoyed my time with it. I laughed more than anything. I don't think I'm going to run back to it anytime soon, but part 1 I could definitely watch here and there because part 1 was a pretty good movie. If you guys found this review helpful, please consider hitting the like button, sharing our video, and maybe subscribing to the channel because that is the best way to help us out. But until next time, guys, have a great day.